Hello, and welcome to Right to Be Wrong, the show that revives the art of conversation, accommodating varied views on sports, culture, politics, world events, and every topic under the sun. After all, you have a right to be wrong. Here are your hosts, Dave and Tony.
Welcome to the Right to Be Wrong podcast, the podcast where Dave is right and Tony is wrong. How are you, my friend?
Good, Dave. Good. Excellent weekend of football for the locals here in Sydney.
What was it?
Yeah, great win for the Cronulla Sharks.
What was it?
A great weekend of football.
What was it?
It was a great weekend. No, it's a good time.
My Bulldogs got done, but it was a very good weekend of football.
It's a good time of year.
I wasn't surprised.
Back into September, there's this lovely, comfortable temperature in Sydney. You can walk around without breaking into a sweat. There's a bit of a breeze.
Walk around the house naked.
Yeah, it's finals football. We're slowly getting into the first weeks of the spring carnival as well in terms of racing. So it's all happening, Dave. It's all happening. And again, for my sins, which are long and detailed, I'm here again to be lectured by Dave on another topic.
I forgive you, my son. For your penance, please say 3 Hail Bulldogs.
Hail Bulldogs full of grace, the Lord is with thee.
That's the way.
Blessed art thou among Galvin, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb. Kick out. Well,
kick out. I tell you what, we could have done with prayers yesterday. I was at the game. It was terrible. We were terrible. We won't go too deep into it because we'll do a whole episode coming up for the grand final. But Lachlan Galvin is certainly not the Messiah for the Bulldogs, I can tell you that. But what are we going to discuss, Tone? Because it's not football.
Dave, so we were going to talk about like a look back at our first 50 episodes and pick the eyes out of it, but we thought we'd have a discussion around the battle of ideas, Dave. So the whole basis of this podcast is you and I from slightly different angles, slightly different viewpoints when it comes to political issues, but we can still converse, argue, debate, and walk away knowing, yep, I've learned something, or yeah, I've confirmed Dave's an idiot, or yes, Tony's dumb. Or any combination.
We already knew Dave was an idiot.
Right.
And the other thing, one of the most important things actually, because I've been thinking about this as you threw up the topic of the battle of ideas, is that in an hour we're not going to solve whatever it is. We'll throw out our initial thoughts. They're obviously a bit more in-depth than 120 characters in a tweet. But sometimes the conversations that we have, they could run through multiple episodes. They could run over multiple years. And that's a really big part of dialogue and a very big part of when you're discussing very large ideas on how humanity should move forward, how we should structure a society, what the things are that we deem to be the norms and values of a society that underpin everything from our schooling, our healthcare, our national defense, our economy. These things really take a lot of dialogue that is constantly ongoing and constantly changing. And I think one of the key things that a strength to blow our own trumpet here of you and I is we're firm in our positions. We do our research, but we're well aware that our positions on the facts available to us now might not be the opinions we hold in 12 months' time as the sands shift.
Absolutely. But I am going to pick you up on a point straight up. You did say that in an hour we're not going to solve the world's problems. I dispute that, Dave. You throw up any world problem, you and I could sort it out in 36 minutes.
I think we could, but we need more space and room for activities. And more cowbell.
And some night vision goggles.
Oh, wouldn't that be great? Love them. Yeah, we get them in our 50s.
So, Dave, is politics still a battle of ideas, or has polarization fueled by social media damaged politics and potentially democracy forever?
I still think it is the battle of ideas. I just don't think many people are playing that game. As far as social media, I'm still of the view that social media is not the problem. Now, let me say it again, it's not the problem. I'm not saying it's not a problem. I think the problem already exists and social media is magnifying and amplifying, to use your words, and you're correct. I did say magnifying in another episode, and you also said amplifying. And I thought, there you go, Tony being useful and actually earning his keep on this podcast, throwing in an extra word. Which, by the way, I'm going to try and give you more than 25% tonight. I'm trying to be conscious of not talking so much. It's going to be a very quiet episode, Tone.
So those stats on subscribers and who's watching, I actually want them split down by host or co-host.
Oh, I only showed you all those numbers. They're my numbers.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, your subscribers are like one. Apparently, some strange woman on the Nepalese mountains.
Thanks, Dom.
So, yeah, it's your boys, one account. You should tell them to get separate accounts.
Separate
Two
accounts.
subscribers and
Right.
you double your base.
Absolutely. So what about a historical perspective, Dave? Politics has always been around like competing ideas, yeah? So what are some of the main ones? Capitalism versus socialism, centralization versus decentralization, the size of government.
Public and private.
Yeah, public and private, all of that. And then like, liberal, conservative philosophy, progressive versus conservative philosophies. So historically there's been, key planks or not ideologies, key planks of ideas in terms of how the politics would kind of shape around those. But I think 30 years ago, I was more confident that the people actually representing me in that battle of ideas were taking a much longer term view and a much broader base in terms of people they can impact favorably by winning their battle of ideas.
I think you're correct. I agree with you. It's one of those rare moments I've got to say that again on the podcast and add to your infinite loop of me telling you you're right. Which always, I get like this sick feeling in my throat. It's like I vomit and have to, Tony's right. It's just terrible. Very bitter. But I think the difference is because politics is downstream from culture.
Yep.
And this is where I've said before that I think when you mentioned different parties in different jurisdictions in different elections, whether or not they've prosecuted cultural war arguments or not, I still maintain it is downstream from culture. And I think it's one of the things that is both good and bad about our politics, which is our politicians are meant to be there and taking on board what the zeitgeist is from the population and attempting to enact what it is we want them to, with obviously a better understanding of the mechanisms of how that's going to play out than what the average person has. On the downside of that, it also means that if you get a society that can be either influenced by either an individual or a group, or it's influenced by what's going on a macro level and then manipulated and utilized by an individual or a group, you can go to a very dangerous place in that downstream of politics. So the obvious ones of those, for example, are Hitler, so the Weimar Republic, so post-World War I, where the Weimar Republic has hyperinflation, high unemployment, a lot of resentment towards the former leaders, a lot of resentment to the victors in the First World War. And then, of course, Hitler rails against that, and that morphs into what we know as Nazism. You still see the same thing with the fascists in Italy with El Duce, and you saw it with the Bolsheviks in the Russian Revolution overthrowing the Tsar. So being downstream from what the people want is both good and bad. I would like to think that our leaders of the sort of post-Second World War period up until about the fall of the Soviet Union, on average, we can certainly complain both left and right and center, but I'd like to think that period there, we had some very recent memory of how things go wrong because, as Clausewitz said, war is diplomacy by other means. Charlie Kirk said, when the dialogue stops, the shooting begins. And I think that because we've had literally people that fought in those wars, people that had direct parents that fought in those wars, or people that saw the consequences of those wars, that we were better at having longer-term visions of nation building and a better dialogue at what each nation was trying to do and how each nation interacted with other nations on the global stage. I think post-collapse of the Soviet Union in the early 90s, sort of the bogeyman of free market Western liberal capitalism went away. And then we started to get to the point where as the older generations have died off, we have both nothing to keep, say, the US as the global leader in check, and we've got to hyper individualism and we've got to corporatism rather than free market capitalism. And what I mean by that is that we've got control of the government by sort of corporate profits and driven solely by that. And then the final part of that is that because we then also are into generations that have no living relatives that they speak to or hear stories from or educationally they're not aware of the mistakes of the past, I think we're starting to see a rise of a generation that wants to repeat them. And that's, for example, the rise again of the excitement of the young around socialism and communism.
Yeah, we're kind of back there, aren't we?
In some ways.
In some ways,
yeah.
Yeah.
Very much
But,
so.
So these ideological debates in the past, through innovation, through reform, through investment, they actually move society forward, right?
Very much.
Whereas now it seems like, is it the nature of the ideological debates that we're having now compared to the ones we were having 60 years ago, post-World War II? Is it the nature of those debates which make it almost impossible to move it forward? Or is it the fact that there's this whole populism piece where people want to be constantly taking a contrary opinion, potentially making up their own facts, that some of these ideologies are so inbuilt and fixed that people actually can't see the other side, and to be quite honest, don't want to see the other side?
I think it's been it's become that way because we've dropped the ball on a number of things that really matter in society. So the first thing is education. So the point around education, and I don't use it limited to education, means academic education. And the way, for example, I've seen even AOC again today say something that Crockett said, that the woman off The View, I can't remember, not Joy Reid, but anyway, Sunny Hostin say, which is when they say someone's uneducated, what they mean is you don't have that piece of paper out of a university, out of a college, credentialed. And that's definitely the wrong way to see things in life. However, your school system should be such that what you're teaching are the basics, whether someone ends up a plumber or a bricklayer or a professor in the sciences, you should be teaching the ability to engage in conversation. You should be teaching civics. You should be teaching individual freedom as much as individual responsibility. You should be teaching discipline. Because something I thought of this week, because as we talk through this stuff, which I love doing, between recording, I think about what are we going to do? I think about what's been discussed. What have I taken out of it? Have I said something that's wrong? Where have I missed something I could have said?
Because actually, you don't need to do that, because I do that every week, and I've got a long list. Tom and I actually offline, we've come up.
You've got a whole best of or worst of.
Leading into our Christmas episode, there's going to be a whole blooper session.
Is that like 7 hours long?
Oh yeah, it's
or is it like
potentially longer?
5-day test, 5-day test of Dave fucking up. And there's something else, right? I don't think people have the ability now to go, I got it wrong. So what?
Yeah.
Right now, I don't mean so what, because I know there can be big consequences for what we get wrong. So I borrowed too much money, I can't pay it back, right? But what I mean is everyone's human. Everyone's going to make mistakes. Everyone you talk to knows something you don't. So if you have the ability to open your mind and have the conversation, not only will you get smarter, but having the ability to know that you can put your opinions forward, you can try and do something, and it's okay if you're wrong or okay if you get it wrong. So what? That's what's going to make you a better person. But what I thought about is, what's the through line? Because when we're talking about the battle of ideas and the collapse and the ability of people to have the battle of ideas, it transcends everything, right? So we're talking about foreign policy. We're talking about economics. We're talking about what's education look like? What does health look like? What's the family look like? What's law and order look like? It's everything. The one thing I think has been removed that actually touches on everything that's gone wrong is discipline. We remove discipline from school, right? You don't get the cane or the strap, or there's no real consequences for your behavior. And I'm not advocating belt every kid unnecessarily. I'd like to do a whole episode on whether or not we should have corporal punishment back, but it could be something where you can opt out. If you don't want your kid to get the strap if they really deserve it, you opt out. If I want them to, I want that discipline. We've taken the discipline away. That look at how people speak to our police officers. Now, generally speaking, there's always going to be bad apples. Someone can always pull up a video and go, oh, look at this police brutality. Yeah, but there's hundreds of millions of police interaction on a weekly basis, and most of them aren't that. So why should you be able to spit in a policeman's face, tell him to fuck off, give him the bird, right? There's no discipline there. The individual has no discipline on credit. Just tap, tap, tap your card all the time instead of you can't afford that. You make a coffee at home. You can't afford to buy that car. You can't afford that holiday. You're borrowing too much for your car. There's no discipline in terms of how people dress when they go to work now. So it's not like you're expected to turn up with your hair cut and looking neat and your shoes shine and presented. So there's a lack of individual discipline which is leading to a lack of macro level discipline. Because if the individuals themselves aren't disciplined and they get into leadership, they get into government, they're not disciplined. So we've got ill discipline around fiscal deficits.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say, Dave. So the government, in that example where you said in terms of credit, tap, go, all good.
That's modern Western government.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Because basically, governments have got the ability, and we've spoken about this on multiple occasions, to print money.
Yep. And we need to remove that. That's
right. But even like the debt ceiling in the US, our foreign debt here in Australia, just the lack of discipline around that to make the hard decisions to say you can't have it all at once and you need to get back to sustainable and define what sustainable is, right?
Correct.
So paying 17% of your income on interest or whatever the number might be to fund debt to deliver X, Y, and Z. Well, look at whatever you're delivering and maybe let's not have X, Y, and Z all at once, right? But I take your point in terms of that lack of discipline. But if let's take an example around the battle of ideas and one that's so topical globally as well as locally, climate change. Okay, that's one where we should be digging all the dirt out of the ground and maximising it for our own benefit versus we shouldn't be doing anything else. If you're not moving, actually, if you're stationary for more than 3 seconds and you're on a country road, I'm going to attach a windmill to you, and you're going to become some type of renewable source of energy. So,
with my bald head, maybe I could become the first human solar farm.
But there's not the middle ground in the argument doesn't get any airplay. It's always the extremes. The Nationals want to drop net zero. Bowen wants to go large on 62% reduction by 2035. And the extremes, which are represented by our major parties, unfortunately, they get all the attention, but there's a sensible centre here. What are we trying to achieve with energy? Security, right? We want to make sure that to the extent that we can, we leave a more sustainable energy source for our future generations. We want to make sure that people aren't paying overs, especially in a country like Australia that's abundant in terms of the natural resources, right? But there's all these things. I'm sure there's a sensible middle ground in terms of what I would call the energy transition, but it gets no airplay, Dave. And you know why? Because people want the clicks and people want the rage.
But that's the same on every single topic.
I know.
Because that gets back to what I talk about with not teaching people civics, how to think, how to discuss. Because in life, there are very, very few things that are black and white. Very few. Most things, when you get into it, there's nuance, right? And part of that, the ability to get into that nuance means you need to be adult enough to be able to discuss a conversation without getting offended, be open that someone else could be right. And even beyond that, it's not even one of the things, like I joke all the time, I talk a lot, but as you've noticed, if you listen back, if everyone listens back through 50 episodes, if I get into an area that I don't have a lot of experience in, I'll say, I don't have a lot of experience. Here's what I think, and I'll go away and do more research. So on that level, one of the things we've got is we've either got universities and think tanks stacking themselves with climate scientists that damn well know they're manipulating data because they don't want to miss the boat on what they want. Or you've got the other side that people will commission reports that could be supported and paid for by, say, oil and gas, that even though they know they're going to be around for a long time, who wants to drop 10% of your market when it's a global market worth billions, if not trillions of dollars a year? So I think part of the conversation that doesn't get had is getting people to actually start to understand that most things have that nuance. So using climate change, the first thing is to say, and this gets back to the point of not having relatives that were in the Second World War, First World War, even Vietnam for many today. But this is part of saying, you know what? In 1920, they used to write articles in your newspaper about the world was ending, it's going to freeze over. Here they are. In the 1980s, they used to write articles about the world's going to burn and we're going to be in a fiery hell. Here they are. Now, neither of those two things happened, and they knew it didn't happen, so they turned around and they changed it to climate change because they didn't want to get stuck. We can have it either way. So then you start to question, well, how much of it is true? And if you really get into it, you go, the world's not going to end. But when you dig in, you go, but we probably shouldn't be wiping out forests. We probably shouldn't be pumping oil into this. We we probably CO2 emissions are not the big bad guy, but if we can not pollute because we find more sustainable ways to produce our energy and we don't pump it into the air, that's a good thing. So once you clear out the rubbish, then you can start having an honest conversation. And once you're in that space and you say, okay, what are the genuine issues? Let's rank order them in terms of severity, in terms of impacting the planet, impacting humanity. Then within that, let's rank order the ones that are the quick wins. And then within that, we need to understand which ones are affordable at scale and sustainable. Because one thing I'm starting to hear of with people I talk to, they're in the auto industry, we're about, in Australia anyway, we're about in our first large turnover of electric vehicles. So what I mean by that is that we're at the stage where people have bought, say, a Tesla, they're changing for the first time now, right? The Tesla's 5 years, 7 years old.
How's that resale value looking?
That's exactly what's happening. People are going into yards for their trade-ins and their jaws are hitting the ground, finding out their Tesla's not worth much.
Yeah, because the bloke's going, how long you had it for? But who's paying for that next battery?
Correct, right? Now, when we get into batteries and you say, well, if you buy, for example, an old Corolla and you say you pay $5,000 and you might worst case scenario it, right? With the exception of an engine blown, but you know that Corollas just have 50 years of proof that doesn't happen. So you look at it and you say, okay, I might be up for new tires. I'm up for a new battery, oil change, blah, blah, blah. And worst case scenario, it turns out there's some big issue, cost me a couple of grand. This car at worst in the next month might cost me an extra $5 on top of the $5 I paid. Your Tesla, tomorrow, your battery could go and you got to find $25,000, give or take, for the battery. The other thing that's happening with them is when they're in accidents, for example, and the fuel cell being the battery happens to have been dented a bit, insurance companies don't run the risk, so they write the whole car off. So using that as an example, we're already at a starting point there that we've got some questions around resale, but then we've got to say, okay, you said the CO2 emissions of the vehicle that you're running reduced, but we've completely set aside the production of the vehicle. So what about the child labour with the cobalt? What about all these other things? So this is not me at this point saying, let's revert completely to ICE engines, because what it looks like from what I've been reading, and Honda's leading this, they're saying the future of the engine is actually retaining the internal combustion engine, but it will be hybrid. So battery has a place.
I agree.
And then what they're talking about, because as a Formula One fan, they're talking about bringing back V8 engines, but with 100% synthetic fuels.
Yeah.
Right. So the conversation's starting to move towards that.
It's evolving.
That's right.
Because
that's sensible stuff.
Yeah, that's right.
Because people are finding costs. And, well, firstly, they're finding the world was meant to end 3 years ago again on this latest. We're all going to die. And then they're obviously finding out that where the rubber hits the road, unintended. Greta. Well, Greta Thunberg should be the absolute lightning rod for people to realise that thought the world was ending. She cares that much about the world and climate change now that she says nothing about it. She's too busy on Free Palestine. Why would you be worried about Free Palestine if the world's going to end?
That's right.
So, and this is one of those things. The battle of ideas requires adults in the room.
Yeah, but so that excellent point. And again,
say that again. Tom, cut this into an infinite loop.
By the way, there was a bit of a spiel that Dave just went on there, Tom. Can you just convert that into a PowerPoint presentation and put the R2B wrong logo top right? Because that's smacked of consultant talk if I've ever heard it. You should have heard yourself.
Well, the trouble is I've been sitting next to you and it's by osmosis. I'm turning C-suite.
I was about to start yelling, wanker.
I'm actually going to hyphenate my name.
To?
I don't know. I'll have to find something that goes well with it, just so I sound like I'm out of an elite private school and they know what I'm talking about.
So the
Lodge Smythe.
That's right.
Does that work?
It does.
Yeah.
It does.
And ladies and gentlemen, put your hands together for the keynote speaker on climate change, David Lodge Smythe.
So, Dave, the climate change one is a good one. And at the back end of that discussion, you spoke around having the sensible people in the room to progress these things forward. But the decision makers and the policy makers in this space, and those policies directly impact the markets that they're either trying to create or regulate if they're existing markets. So the people in that space who are driving all this, Dave, don't have much common sense, right? And this is because they're funded by special interests to drive a certain outcome.
They are, but I think it's deeper than that.
Go on.
Because let's look at sort of US, UK, Australia over the last 30 years, roughly. And let's look at the prime ministers and the presidents and the key decision makers, whether they be the foreign ministry, whether it be economics and trade portfolios, if we go back 3 decades, for the most part, and I know politicians are politicians, but for the most part, they had a longer term view. They cared about their legacy as politicians do, but they cared about their legacy literally for decades. How will I be remembered? And the example in Australia here is that, and people can disagree with some of the outcomes either side, but generally speaking, I've pointed out before, Howard, Hawke, Keating have very good records overall and a good legacy of what they attempted to do and achieve for Australia. And they're both sides of the aisle.
Yep.
If you look at Reagan and then you look into Clinton, generally the same sort of stuff.
So did they go Reagan and then HW?
Sorry, yeah,
and then
HW
into
Clinton,
yeah.
right? So when you still look at that period, and again, I'm not saying both sides of the aisle nailed everything they got it right, but what I mean is, if you look back, there's really not an absolutely disgraceful legacy that's been left that you could say
or trashed.
Yeah, that they tried to do. They weren't trying to do the best thing by the most amount of people to take their countries forward.
And then in UK, you had Thatcher and de Blair.
Correct, and we don't have those sorts of leaders anymore. We don't have people who are forward thinking and nation building. Everything's short term.
And I think, see, we'll start on the Australian one. So we had, you said, it went in order. It went Hawke, Keating, Howard. Okay, now. Politically, I think Howard did some despicable things in terms of some agendas that he pushed in order to get re-elected at certain times. But fundamentally, I respected him because he had a certain set of principles around how he wanted to formulate his policies, especially from an economic perspective, and he held true to them, right? And even on some of the societal stuff in terms of the banning of the guns, right, after Port Arthur. But I didn't agree with him politically, but he had the principles to say, no, I want to take policy in this direction. I'm going to bring people on the journey. And he won 4 elections. So people must have been saying, yeah, that makes sense to me, right?
I think you just hit a key word there, principles.
But you go back to Hawke, you go back to Keating, even now people who are a bit older, you go back to Whitlam. Whitlam had a certain set of principles, right? And people will say he blew up the budget, did this, that, and the other, but he had a certain set of principles. And as I've said in the past, when you've got the political capital, you need to burn it and use it, right?
I think if you're engaging in the battle of ideas properly on any topic, you're not engaging in the battle of ideas in bad faith. So you're not doing it to enrich yourself or your family.
Yep.
Right? Now, again, I'm not naive. I know politicians like depending on their age, they like a post-political career that, in corporate, and they get all these cushy gigs and high-paid paying gigs and so on and so forth. But one thing that was interesting last week from Trump was talking about the corporate reporting that companies, they were changing the corporate reporting from quarterly to biannual. And he literally mentioned the Chinese and said the Chinese don't do this. They have a longer-term view. Now, this is something I've railed against for a long time. Now, I know I'm using one small thing in corporate, but I think that's the difference, right? Whether you're in politics, whether you're in corporate, if you're looking at the next quarter, that's a very short time frame. And if you're looking to that means you're being judged by that. So it doesn't matter what you did in Q1 and Q2. If Q3 is bad in corporate, they already start putting the pressure on you. Now, in the public sphere, when you're getting polling data and social media comments and everything all the time, you're not looking towards, say, that last 12 months into your term when you're moving in onto an election footing and then starting to take note of polls and what we can do to prepare ourselves. Everything's so reactive, so short term that you don't want to build a key piece of infrastructure that ribbon's going to get cut 5 years after you're gone, because that's not going to do your election any good. And that's part of the problem. To me, if you're being a good leader, you're doing things in the best interest of the country, the state, whatever, that will echo long after you're gone. People won't even know your name with some rare exceptions. And so what?
So, Dave, on the corporate stuff, there's a whole raft of incentives that they deploy to make sure that executives at the senior level, I'm talking listed companies, so they design their incentives to make sure that there's a much longer term focus, right, in terms of deferrals, delays, a portion of 80% of this year's incentive that you think you weren't. We parked it, you get it in 5 years' time. So there's ways they can control that, but I get it. It's still very much
giant gaps.
Yeah.
And
It's
because
still like,
Alan Joyce is proof of that.
yeah, well, like what have you done for me in the last 3 seconds, right?
Well, what happens is if you're in a business where your remuneration in terms of share options, or you can sell, or bonuses, you're in something where the issues are not going to play out for a long time. So replacing aircraft, upgrading your facilities, so on and so forth. It's very easy to increase margin over that time period to get done. I want to do a whole episode on whether or not bonuses should be paid, because to me, I'm very much that if you're doing a good job at the end of a 12-month period, and you say here's where we're at, and within that, I don't just want to say cost for $1 million with 100% margin, we made $2 million. This year, costs were only 1.5 with a 200% margin, we made 4.5. I think there's a whole bunch of metrics within that boards need to start looking at and say, what was your staff turnover? Because that's always a key metric to tell you how happy people are. What's the average income of people in our business?
Yeah,
what's our reputation out in the market? All these sorts of things.
What's the CEO to average worker pay?
Correct.
Like what's the multiple,
Correct.
right? So a lot of those are in place. The issue with those bonuses, Dave, incentives is we agree that the market for CEO, CEO or senior executive talent is a global one now. Case in point, our mate who just took over ANZ, I think Portuguese, but worked in about 15 different countries, and they went and plucked him out of somewhere in Singapore and brought him in to run ANZ. So it's a global market. So if part of that global market involves, a disproportionate amount of variable compensation, well, then we have to pony up as well to some extent. But I do take your point that there needs to be a focus on longer-term incentives or longer-term goals in order to leave that legacy. But that's one thing that I always thought was different with government, that if you've got people who are actually genuinely concerned about their legacy, right, well, then they're going to make decisions based on that and not worried about the latest news poll. But, Dave, the election happened in May this year. Was it May or March?
I think it was March.
March. And literally a month after the election, if not sooner, the first polls are out.
Yeah.
Like, really? And I have heard some discussion recently around the talk to going to a 4-year term at federal level, which I think is a good one.
So do I.
I'd actually go 5.
Yeah, so would I. But I'd accept an extension to 4, but my preference is 5.
Just give certainty to everyone.
Yeah.
Straight up.
Well, costs will reduce
Exactly.
because we get one less election in every 10 years.
That's right.
Also, that the costs are less to the
But what's more,
public.
gets this longer term thinking around doing the right things and not being constrained by, how's this going to reflect in the polls?
Yep.
One term that really shits me, Dave, the politics or the optics of that is not good for the government or the opposition. I don't give a shit about the politics of it.
Actually,
is it good policy? Is it going to impact favourably on a proportion of constituents? Focus on the policy, but to a point that we've spoken about a lot, journalists are now activists. Everything's a gotcha moment.
Correct. And actually the optics, Donald Trump for me is proof that the optics in politics are very overrated. Because, I'm on the Trump train, but I'm not in denial. He's no traditional statesman. Says things, and the things he does, at times I think he's very funny. But I'm being honest, he's not a traditional statesman. He could easily say that the things that Donald Trump says and does, the optics, most politicians would never do, right? But why is he in power? Why is he a two-termer? Why has he got both houses? Why is it growing? Now, I know there's some other variables that we could get to why things are growing there, but what are the key things that he spoke to that A, got him elected in 2016 and got him re-elected this time? It's policy. So if you're getting policy right, forget optics. Optics doesn't matter. Most people are apathetic to politics. The only time they care is when the election cycle's coming around or some policy is about to kick in and they'll feel the effects of what what has occurred based off the policy decision you've already made. So this optic stuff is just dribble.
I know.
It only matters. It's a bit like there's a comedian, I wish I could remember his name, a few years ago, when people were first getting fired for a tweet, something that someone didn't like, and he said that only matters if you've got a good job. He said, no one's firing Billy the fry boy at McDonald's for a tweet.
Yeah.
And it's true. It's because the only people that care about those optics are people that live in that bubble that think everyone's judging you. Most people don't care. They don't care if you got a shit personality if you're getting the job done. They don't care if you got a great personality if you're doing a bad job. So optics falls in that category for me. So the battle of ideas requires more than just optics. That's very superficial.
So you and I, Dave, we wrap ourselves up in a lot of this stuff, and we talk a lot of politics, talk a lot of sport. We get wrapped up in the US stuff. We talk about the UK, but we're outliers.
Yeah,
right?
Very much so.
Because to your point, a lot of people are just interested in, listen, who am I voting for? Let me get an understanding of how it may or may not impact me or my family.
How's it affect my wallet?
That's right. And then I'll go and do what I got to do.
Yeah.
But this polarization and this clash of ideologies and this battle of ideas, the budding of the budding of the conflicting ideologies now in terms of things like climate change or freedom of speech or hate speech, whatever it might be, it's not new, right? So in the 60s and 70s, what was there? There was
the civil rights movement,
civil rights, Vietnam,
the Vietnam War,
women's liberation, right?
But it predates that too, right? Because
absolutely.
The thing around the battle of ideas is that it's played out by very few people. My criticism of the centre left to the centre right, where I would arbitrarily say 75 to 80% of normies reside, is sometimes there's too much apathy. And what happens is, because you're unaware, and you don't have to be as in-depth as nerds like us, but because you're unaware of what's going on, by the time you are aware, sometimes it's too late. So by the time you're aware that the brown shirts are not just a group of men that were disaffected after the First World War and were finding a common cause and home, and suddenly you've got the Nazis, a bit too late. The same thing with the Bolsheviks and so on and so forth. And I think at the moment, and this is one of the things I would suggest, the Charlie Kirk assassination, I think the Kirk effect, for what I'm reading and seeing at the moment, is waking a lot of people up to where the politics are. Now, they happen to be falling to the right because on average, like, let's face it, he was shot a week ago. There hasn't been riots. There hasn't been everything like the George Floyd stuff. But let's play it out so people understand I'm not just going at the far left. If it was the other way and someone on the left and AOC had been assassinated, and it had been the right that were constantly rioting and everything and deifying criminals and whatnot. So I think the Kirk effect is going to be that the average person is now waking up to what is going on politically in the US, and they're starting to realize maybe they need to know a little bit more about what's being taught in their kids' school, about what some of the congressmen stand for, what the senators stand for, what's the direction of the country, and getting a little bit more involved. Now, the only thing I don't want to see is I don't want to see everyone all the time in politics, because one of the issues we've got to is the far left have made everything political. You can't sit and watch sport without it being political. And what I hope we do is, by people waking up, is they wake up for the time to realize you need to take a look at your the structure of government. You need to look at the institutions. You need to readjust and get things right so that you can go back to your apathy and raise the next generation, just to be aware, like, A, appreciate what you have, and be aware how it can go awry. And go awry, as much as I'm saying at the moment, we're talking the progressive woke stuff, that doesn't mean that once this is cleaned out, like, let's say I was a US president, right? I easily can see where the biggest issues are on that far left. However, let's say the magic wand wipes that all out. Woke's gone, schools are getting better. They're funded enough, but they're educating people properly. Universities are no longer sick. We don't have kids turning around thinking getting guns is the solution to the problem. Guess what? You still need to look to that far right and ask yourself, what is going on in the corporate world? Why is that hyper-financialization? Are you lending people too much money? What are you doing about the obesity issue? There's still plenty of things. It's just at the moment the rank order of them is that those things that sort of on average are residing on the centre right to what we call the modern far right, they're lower in the rank order of importance of your law and order, your endless wars, your bizarre trans ideologies and things like that.
The thing is, Dave, politics in Australia, and especially in the US. So if I was to take a survey of the topics that are discussed daily in US media or social media, a lot of them would be, I'd call not culture-related topics. So this Charlie Kirk thing is obviously a big story, right? And Trump's waiting on it. He spoke at the memorial. I get it. And then
I reckon 90% of it's cultural stuff.
But then, like, you look at Jimmy Kimmel, may he rest in peace, and how that kind of transpired, right? And then I went and did a bit of digging, and I stumbled onto an article, a couple of articles actually, on the fact that a lot of soybean farmers in the Midwest have been absolutely hammered because China's no longer buying any soybeans as a retaliatory tariff, right? And I say to myself, these are real outcomes. Does that soybean farmer really care about, especially now, he's under the pump, he's broke, he's got a bad season last season, he's got no money this season, he's probably got debt repayments to make, he's got kids to raise, all of that.
And the flow on around his community
That's
that
right.
rely on those
So
big farms.
Do you reckon they really care about the immediate issues of climate change? Maybe not.
No.
Do you reckon they really care about some whack job senators in the Bronx, shoving down this ideology down people's throats? No, he just wants to know, can I just get back and get paid? Right.
Wallet. Bottom line.
And I think that politicians, we get sucked into this, right? And it happens in Australia as well. In terms of the last election, you spoke about it a lot, Dave, but who spoke about the cost of living in an understandable way that could make it real for people, where they could hear a politician say, he's talking about me.
No one.
He gets me.
It
right?
was a lay down misere for the Dutton
and this is
coalition
what I'm
thing.
saying, Dave.
And they didn't mention any of it.
But that's what I want politics to get back to that. What are the outcomes for the majority of people, and what are the policies we're doing to make sure that we make those outcomes as beneficial as possible through whatever means, right?
Now, people, I know there's plenty of people with no kids. I know there's plenty of people that are not married. But the reality is the basis, the foundation of your healthy democratic society should be focused on family and cost of living for family. Now, I'll make clear, that doesn't mean if you're outside that, there's nothing for you. What I'm saying is that's the foundation. From there, if you've got that right, you can afford to work around the margins to ensure that the minorities don't fall through the cracks, or you mitigate the risk of them falling through the cracks. The Jimmy Kimmel one's an interesting thing for a number of reasons. Firstly, like here, when the rugby player Israel Folau makes comments quoting a Bible, there's a human right protected. We don't have a constitution. Well, we've got a constitution, but we don't have a Bill of Rights here. But I was protected. Everyone who fired for saying something is a private citizen. Now, when Kimmel goes, and I still think the company's hiding behind his poor ratings, because I saw what they were, and he's been losing money the same as Colbert. So I think they're hiding behind that anyway.
Mind you, they've lost some more overnight.
They have, but that gets to a bigger issue too. So the Kimmel one, I think it's interesting, the hypocrisy of it. That being said, I'm a free speech guy, and I don't think he said anything wrong in terms of I find it vulgar that he played the game. I think he could have come out and said it's terrible. This is not the way we go, blah, blah, blah. I think the problem people forget in this is that as an organization, your employer can still be sued for lies. So just because you got free speech, and I support free speech, that doesn't mean your free speech can't get you sued if you're telling lies that you don't. So,
but he wasn't telling lies, man.
So, well, he was, because he knew at that point he wasn't MAGA. And when he said, if you've seen the clip, he goes, they're trying to say he's anything but one of them. Yeah. And I'm like, dude, come on.
But the issue is, Dave, my concern around it, like free speech for
me.
But
I wouldn't take him off the air anyway.
Free speech for me, it's not, because now on the right they started saying, no, it's not free speech if it's hate speech.
No, see.
Really?
And this is why I think Pam Bondi, for me, I think I sent you that text. right? And that's what
and then someone said, actually, it might have been Ben Shapiro basically come out and said, listen, I'm uncomfortable with this.
We've just spent 10 years fighting against it from the left.
I'm uncomfortable with this because you've got to understand when the shoe's on the other foot, what might happen.
Well, it was, and that's the trouble.
Yeah.
So for me, the Kimmel one, like as much as he said things that, okay, probably could have got him sued because there has been, what a lot of people aren't hearing, there has been a lot of out-of-court settlements from TV companies now that people are standing up and going, you know what, actually, I agree with free speech, but you've crossed the line into defaming me. For me, I would have left him. If I'm the right, leave him. Yeah, who cares? Say what he wants.
So my issue with it, Dave, is there wasn't like a million people protesting or calling the FCC. Like this FCC appointee, the FCC chair.
I think he overstepped.
He did. And that's the only thing that troubles me about it. When you step into something like that, the perception is.
And I think he overstepped not because he stated something that was incorrect. I think that's the wrong thing as the chair of the FCC to be on a podcast that is knowingly on the right? So it's a partisan. It's not like, our listeners know you're centre left, I'm centre right, but we're not a political podcast. So you've gone on to one that leans one side and you've started to say, I thought that was the wrong thing to do. But that being said, for me, the situation around Jimmy Kimmel, I still believe there's an element there that just like with Colbert, and I was shocked when I found out Colbert was losing $40 million a year and they just kept running it. I think this is nice, convenient cover.
Yep.
We don't have to say we fired you because your ratings are in the gutter.
Yep.
You're getting to hide behind it. Let's face it, we know people do that. We know companies do that. But to me, I thought, you know what? If there's litigation from someone, the courts establish you defamed, that's how it should have run, should have been left alone. But also, that's what I was going to say. The big one here for me gets back to my underlying position that corporates should stay out of politics.
Absolutely.
Because they copped it on the right, and Disney in particular lost all their tax-free stuff in Miami when they went that way. Now apparently they're copying it from the left over Kimmel. The first thing I was taught, even as an apprentice in a small barbershop, is in the barbershop there are two things you don't discuss with clients: politics and religion, right? And
I want a fucking refund.
Yeah, but there's a difference.
I want 20 years of haircut money back from you, pal.
There's a difference. We didn't discuss. I told you. There was no discussion.
So, Dave, can I ask?
But you know what I mean? Because what happens is, and Michael Jordan said this once when someone said,
I remember.
Would you come out and endorse blah, blah, blah?
He goes, no.
He said, no, Republicans buy shoes too.
That's right.
Right? So business is business. And I hope this is a wake-up call for corporates that don't think, the wind's blowing that way, we can make money because we're on this. Because guess what? The wind's changed, and now you've pissed off both sides. So if you're Disney, go back to making good, wholesome, quality content for families, and don't go Republican, don't go Democrat. The same thing here. If you're Rugby Australia, do you even exist? I don't know. Does it still exist now? It's on its knees.
Yeah.
But don't go hassling your players over their religious views that are human rights protected. So for me, this is a big thing in the battle of ideas. If a corporate, your ideas, get back to what are the ideas being thrown around by your staff on new products and services that you can go to market with, instead of having political discussion. And I do think it's a time, too, for businesses to clean out all the people that can't do that, because there are a lot of people, whether it be in universities, whether it be in corporates, that aren't aware enough or adult enough to actually say, you know what, I can't not be political in my job, so I probably need to go find another job.
Yeah.
So clean them all out, and let's get back to work is work, sport is sport. And for people like you and I that want to be in the political scrum, let people choose to go and be in it. Don't force it down their throats when they turn on the NBA, they turn on the NFL, they turn on the Formula One, they turn on the rugby league. Deliver a great product, let people escape the politics, clean up the institutions, educate your kids in such a way that they can have a conversation as an adult as they grow, they understand civics. And when we fix all this stuff, you can go back to the apathy and leave all the nerds, deal with the peripheral shit on whether or not we should move a GST up 1% or whether or not we should get rid of capital gains tax or so on and so forth.
I get it. Can we finish up with some questions, Dave?
faraway
So
term.
we've spoken about polarization. So is polarization the problem, or is it just politics becoming more transparent and raw? Because politics now, through social media, is opened to so many more people. 40 years ago, or 35 years ago, Dave, I'd get my Daily Telegraph. Front page would only be some politics, maybe page 3 wasn't.
Page 3 was that was the best.
That's right, page 4, page 5.
That's where I got all my
it.
information from.
So is the fact that politics is just so much more cut through now in terms of the exposure that it gets through social media, it's made it so much more transparent, and that's driven the polarization?
I wouldn't say the transparency's driven the polarization. I think politics is, you said raw. I think that's right. I think it's getting more raw because I think bullshit doesn't fly anymore. I think because we have the ability now to, see more things and obtain more information and more facts, that authenticity matters more now. So I think that the old school politician, stick on your suit, kiss the baby, put on an image, pose for a photo, I think that's gone. I think people do want authenticity now, and I think that's why you see politicians now will drop an F-bomb every now and then, or whatever comes to mind, as long as it's still authentic and in the moment. I think the polarization comes about from the social media, and the social media comes about from the algorithms, and the algorithms reinforcing our opinions. And we mentioned this in another episode, and whether or not algorithms that we should. I'm not big on government stepping in for things because, let's face it, they break more than they repair. But I wouldn't mind some sort of legislation that actually requires an algorithm that for every thing it sends you that you like, it sends something that you don't. Now, obviously, it doesn't mean people are going to read it, but at least if you look in your feed and you've got 10 suggestions, say, down a YouTube channel, you might have, using politics as a pure basis for it, you might have 5 that are Republican, 5 that are Democrat, 5 that are Liberal, 5 that are Labor, 5 that are Tory, 5 Conservative. And I know that's a little utopian neat, but what I'm suggesting is it's the algorithms that are reinforcing things that are making us feel like everything's this way.
Yeah, I get it. So then, Dave, in that context, and you've spoken about this term before, do we need a new social contract between politicians, citizens, and the platforms?
Yeah, definitely. I think one thing that's broken across a lot of things is the social contract. I think a lot of people need to get back to, if you don't want to do the best thing by your team in a job, if you don't want to do the best thing by your organization as a CEO and by your external stakeholders or clients, if you don't want to do the best thing by your constituents as a politician, don't stick your hand up for leadership. We've got too many people that love the title, love the money. I've seen so many people applying for jobs. I've heard people say it, I want to make this because I want to buy a second house. That's not why you climb a ladder. In fact, the irony is, in my experience, the best people that lead are the ones that don't want to lead. They normally get tapped on the shoulder and talked into it. Not that, pick me, pick me, pick me. So, if you're in that boat, and there's plenty of them, stop doing things for yourself. You're not a leader.
I get it, Dave. I get it. How do we wrap, Dave? How do we wrap it up? So,
well, I think it's important for everyone out there, and even people listening. I've said it before, I'll say it again. If you're watching the podcast and you think that I say a lot of things that are right, and you love me and you don't like Tone, and I'm being serious here. I'm not saying you hate Tone. It can be reverse. You love Tone. You think I'm always wrong. That's okay. That's not a problem. But start to for people that think I'm always right, I tell you now, I'm not. So if you've listened to all 50 episodes and you think there's nothing Dave's ever said that, I disagree with that. I don't think that's right. I don't think that that way to do it is the right way. That's what should be happening. I hope what we're doing is stimulating conversation, showing how it's done, showing that the sharing of ideas is the way to go about it. So, I'm well aware that I don't get everything right, but I'm not afraid to surround myself by smart people that are going to increase my knowledge, increase my ability to contribute something rather than just take.
Am I one of those smart people?
You are one of.
One of how many?
You're in the top 2 or 3. I mean,
we've spoken about this before. Great discussion as always, Dave. Do take care. Have a good week. And what do we always say, mate?
You have a right to be wrong. Thanks, everyone.
See ya.
Thank you for listening to this episode, and we hope you enjoyed it. Like us on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok. Please leave us a review on Apple Podcasts and Spotify.